Tensions are mounting between Westminster and the devolved parliaments over the best way forward in coming out of lockdown. Boris Johnson will set out his plans for England on Sunday night, with ministers insisting any short-term changes to measures will be modest. But the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, says extreme caution's required at this critical juncture to avoid a rapid resurgence of the virus. Professor Adam Tomkins is the Conservative MSP for Glasgow, and he joins me now. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Is there a problem, do you think, between the nations in terms of the communication over the last week or so?
Well, I certainly hope not, and I think that I think the clarity of communication on this is absolutely critical, and one of the things that I think the United Kingdom, including of course Scotland, has got right over the course of the lockdown, by and large, has been that clarity of communication, and I certainly want that to remain the case. But looking beyond communication to the actual substance of the decisions that governments are taking, the United Kingdom is pretty much in lockstep at the moment, and I think that it helps everybody for that to continue.
But is it appropriate that Downing Street seems to be briefing newspapers on possible ways forward, and that's how it's being heard up here in Scotland?
I don't think it's helpful, no.
So have you done anything about this? This is your party that's in government down in Westminster. Have you communicated that?
My job at the moment is to do what I can remotely, by and large, within the Scottish Parliament, in holding the Scottish Government to account for the decisions that it's making. And what happened yesterday in Holyrood, I think, is really important about that. I'm fortunate to be a member of the COVID-19 Scrutiny Committee that Holyrood set up to assess all parliamentarians with the very difficult job of holding the government to account for the decisions it's making. And what we heard yesterday was evidence from two of Scotland's leading public health experts that talked about the huge range of different risks and concerns that ministers have to weigh up and balance as they decide, I hope collectively, how and when and indeed even whether to release aspects of the extraordinary restrictions which have been rightly imposed on all of us, which are, informally known as the lockdown.
So after hearing that evidence, what was your conclusion then?
And the evidence that we heard was that that some of the portrayal of this is a little bit simplistic, and it's not it's not that we need to think about the lockdown only in terms of saving lives, which is, of course, absolutely imperative. But we also need to think honestly and robustly, and this is not easy to talk about, and it's not easy to do, but we need to think honestly and robustly about the public health costs of lockdown as well. Lockdown is not a risk-free option when it comes to public health. We know, for example, that cancer referrals are down 70% in Scotland. We know that the cancellation for the time being, or the suspension for the time being, of cancer screening programs means that people in Scotland with cancer will not be detected and will not be treated as early as would be ideal, and that will have adverse health consequences for them. We know that anxiety is increasing in Scotland. We know that depression is increasing in Scotland. We know that there's a very significant mental health toll to the lockdown. And all I'm calling for is for these risks to be understood as part of the process that government has to go through in terms of figuring out how to navigate our way very carefully, step by step, out of these extraordinary restrictions. And I'm not trying to make any kind of party politics about this. Whenever I talk to government ministers about this, I mean Scottish government ministers about this, they are fully aware of these health risks. All I'm trying to do is to shine light on that side of the argument. I don't think that the argument for releasing lockdown should be primarily about the economy, although the economic cost of lockdown is obviously enormous. I think the case for beginning our way of figuring out how we navigate our way through the next steps should be a public health case.
Yeah. If the science indicates, though, that Scotland should wait longer than the rest of the UK, is that the case? Do you think that should be the case, that we could go slower if need be?
Yeah, but I'm not sure that I'm not sure it's good enough for politicians always to hide behind the science. Actually, of course we need to be led by
What
the
else
science,
is
but the
there
science.
if there's not the science? This is a deadly
Of
disease.
course, we need to be led by the science, but the science only takes you so far. So, if, for example, the science were to say that we think that the R naught number in Scotland is somewhere around 0.7. Or give or take, somewhere around 0.7.
Which is
if the
what
science
they think
takes you
at the
that
moment.
far, then it becomes a political choice, not a scientific choice, about what you do next. Do you allow people to associate beyond their households in controlled small numbers? Do you try and release aspects of the economy to get people back to work? Those aren't scientific choices; those are political choices, and it's my job to try and shine all I'm trying to do here is to try and shine as much light on the various different risks that ministers have to weigh up when they are making those political choices.
But Nicola Sturgeon told us that if nurseries and schools reopened soon, that a second spike would come, that there would be a surge in the R number.
And what the scientists told the Holyrood's COVID-19 committee yesterday, what both scientists told us, is that they think that the evidence points that if there is any second peak, it will not be as severe or as significant as the peak that we have already, we think, passed through. Now, I don't know. I'm not a scientist. All I'm trying to do is to shine light on the expert scientific evidence which I'm hearing in my very privileged position as a member of the Scottish Parliament, is able to talk directly to these scientists and ask them quite detailed and robust questions about how far the science takes us and what political choices we ought to be making on the basis of that scientific evidence.
And how would you proceed now in terms of the testing? Some of the evidence yesterday, there was a suggestion, wasn't there, from the former Chief Medical Officer, Sir Harry Burns, that the whole population is tested so that we know exactly where this virus is.
Yeah, indeed, and I think that's one of the issues that parliamentarians right across the political spectrum will be wanting to explore with ministers as closely as possible in the next few days and weeks. If we're going to test, trace, and isolate, if that's going to be a core part of our strategy as to how we move forward from here, then we need to make sure that the testing is widespread. We need to make sure that the testing is also very accurate. And we heard some quite interesting evidence about that, about the importance of accuracy of testing. And we also need to make sure that the testing is processed very quickly, because there's no point isolating people, 2 or 3 days after you've got a test result back, because it's too late. So test, trace, and isolate is a very complex, logistically, a very complex strategy to put in place and to get right. It's not just about the amount of testing; it's about the accuracy and the speed of the testing too.
Do you think that this can be more nimble, can be made to be quicker and more efficient and more widespread?
Yeah, I think enormous work is going on behind the scenes, both in Scotland and indeed throughout the United Kingdom, to ensure that happens as quickly as possible. But if the evidence is that we can't do anything very much in terms of releasing the lockdown restrictions until those things have been improved with regard to test, trace, and isolate, then that's the position. I'm not calling for lockdown to be ended more rapidly than is safe. Nobody's calling for that. All I'm saying is, let's not do as if lockdown has been imposed in order to save lives and protect the NHS and isn't costing lives and isn't harming the NHS, because there are aspects of our healthcare and there are aspects of our public health that are being directly harmed by the lockdown. And those risks, those threats need to be part of the balance that ministers have to, the balancing exercise that ministers have to undertake as they are deciding whether, when and how to release aspects of this lockdown over the course of the next few weeks.
OK, thank you for joining us on Good Morning Scotland. That was Adam Tomkins, their Conservative MSP for Glasgow.